Welcome back to the Pushing Through Loss podcast, where we share stories, honor resilience, and embrace strength. I am Kalila Green Siciliano, and it is my honor to begin the journey with you. Today we have Alexis with us, and I just said I looked at your website and I know nothing about you except for what I saw. So I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm interested to hear what brought you to the Pushing Through Loss podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. So I'm 41, right?
Okay.
And like in the last probably 5 years, I think like once you hit your mid 30s, people start leaving you, right? Like
Yeah.
you start your friends, if you have grandparents still living, sometimes your parents, it just happens more. And you see kind of like this uptick as I got to 40, I was like, oh my God, like
I just lost that
this
person,
is
and then I lost that
happening.
person, and what is going on?
Yeah. You lose like ex-lovers, you lose, you start like, and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And and I'm a psychic too.
Okay.
And that kind of gives me an unusual perspective on loss. And so I just thought like it would be fun to have a conversation with you about this, because I know that, yeah, my experience of loss is just different,
Right.
than a lot of people's, and I think it could probably be helpful for other people to hear what that's like, and maybe give them some comfort. So
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that, look, any perspective, everybody goes through a different phase of
totally,
grief. And so I
totally,
think that any perspective to hear, like, first of all, if somebody can connect and say, oh my gosh, I had that experience, it makes you
yeah,
feel less alone. And
yeah,
specifically in hearing from you and knowing that you are a psychic, that it's something that you can connect with things that other people might not be able to see or feel or
yeah,
however you explain it.
sure, yeah,
So I appreciate that you reached out.
yeah.
So let's go back a little bit and tell me how you connected with the understanding that you had this ability.
So I was born psychic.
Okay.
I've always like, there's actually pictures of me playing in cemeteries, like being comfortable in cemeteries, feeling safe
Wow.
there. And when a child is psychic, typically what happens is at the age of 7, they'll have some kind of an initiation
Okay.
experience where a well-known figure or teacher will appear to them. So, and that's really just depends on like what culture you're from. Like
Mm,
if you're like Jewish, you might see Moses or Miriam. If you're like growing up in East Asia, maybe you'd see Buddha,
mm.
or like Shiva or somebody like that. And of course I happen to have 2 ordained ministers as parents, so I saw Jesus. So
All
like
right.
that was my experience. And really that's just because, for children, spirit's actually really cool in this way. It will only give you what you're ready for.
Mm,
And so for a child who's psychic, it's going to be a figure that's accessible and feels loving and safe, and is kind of like an introduction, like, hey, this is here for you.
mm,
And we love you, and we're happy that you're here.
mm.
So it's usually a very positive experience. I did not have anyone in my life who had these abilities openly.
Mm.
This was before the internet, because as I said, I am 41. and and so
Kindred spirits, because I'm 42. So
yeah, perfect, you get it.
yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of resources. I was growing up in the church. It wasn't like space to have these conversations about this mysticism. It was a mainline denomination. And so yeah, there was no speaking in tongues or anything. There wasn't that option.
Right.
There wasn't the hooby dooby or the woo option. So it was just like, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody about
Right.
it.
Like, I don't know what to do now.
Yeah. And so I just I would have these experiences. I would have deja vu, or I would have prophetic dreams, or I would have knowings, and I wouldn't tell anybody.
Mm,
And it, as at different stages, there's kind of there's a common timeline for people who are born psychic. So like things at puberty get stronger because everything gets stronger at puberty.
mm.
Late teen years, again, there's kind of like a
Maturity and an
reformation,
understanding.
and things kind of happen at that point. And then kind of in the middle of the 20s, and then again in the middle of the 30s. And so it's I kind of took my time, and I kind
Mm,
of had to deal with a lot of repression of these things, and trying to cobble together information about it. And it really wasn't until I hit my mid 30s that I couldn't deny it anymore.
mm.
And I had a reawakening where spirit was like, okay, we've got things that you have to do, like you have assignments.
Interesting.
So then I had like this trial by fire where everything opened up in a really big way. And I had to figure out how to control things and how to understand what was happening to me. And that process led me to where I am now. And actually, this is relevant, is when I had that reawakening, one of the first major experiences that I had, there was a young woman who passed suddenly,
Mm,
unexpectedly. She was 23, and she came to me and she asked me to give some messages to her mother.
mm,
She had things that her mother needed to hear that she wasn't able to say because it was sudden. Um, and so I was able to pass that message along to her mother, and share that with her, and allow her to have some closure that she wouldn't have otherwise
mm.
experienced.
Was that somebody that you knew, or is it somebody that
It
sought you
it
out?
was, yeah, it was. She was like part of our like greater community, and knew my parents,
Mm,
and different people in my in the church community as well.
mm.
There's kind of a added layer of fun. Um,
I'm sure.
but but it worked. It's actually, and that's kind of the thing. Like, people surprise you
Mm,
about this stuff. It took my parents really retiring for me to feel comfortable being completely open, because
mm,
it is like being part of a political family. People expect you to be a certain way. But then once I was out about being psychic, I found that pretty much everyone has stories about
mm,
unexplained things. And when some loved one passes, most people have an experience where they feel like their loved one comes to them.
mm,
They feel some kind of connection. They receive a sign, something unexplained happens, and it gives
mm.
them a sense of closure. And it's like, so many people have these experiences and we don't talk about them
Right,
openly, and it's kind of sad because it's stigmatized. But it's like, this is a part of the human experience, and this is like proof,
right.
like this is not over. Like, yes, we have separation from the body, which is sad. It's sad when people leave us and we can't give them a hug, and we can't hear their laugh, and we can't call them on the phone. Of course,
Right.
it's sad. And also, it's really not that long until we'll meet everybody again.
Right. And in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, when you think about how long your life is, hopefully you'll live to be 100 years old. In Hebrew, we say Ad Mea Ve'esrim, which is until 120.
Yeah.
And so, but even that, I mean, that sounds like forever. A century is a long time, but in the
It
grand
is.
scheme of things, it's a blip.
It is. Yeah. It's like, and especially when you get into midlife, you're like, oh,
Right.
Oh,
Now
I
that
better
doesn't
get
seem
on this.
so far away.
Yeah, I better do the things that I want to do. Um, and yeah, it's but I end up talking to a lot of my clients about that, because almost all of them have experienced some loss, or I actually have a client who's currently going through an expected loss, and we talk about that. We say, it's like, it is sad, and feel your sadness, like have those feelings, and
Mm,
do what you need to do to process your grief, and also know that, like, it's really not that long. Like,
mm,
the separation is a false, it's a false knowledge, right? Like,
mm.
it's false, it's an illusion, really, because while, yeah, they're not in the body, they're definitely there,
Right.
definitely watching over you. They're definitely, being there, loving on you, and
Right.
you will absolutely see them again at the end.
And I think that you can even see them before then. It's just in a different way. Like you said, there's so many
It's
people who say that they see a sign from somebody, or they say, when you pass, show me a butterfly, or show me a flower, or show me in
Yeah.
the wind, or whatever it might be. And then
Mhm.
the person will literally see whatever it was that they've said to send the sign for the next
Yeah.
day, or even within that hour. I've heard many times where people are like, send me a red robin, and all of a sudden a robin will come flying in front of them. And they're like, what? That's
Yeah.
crazy. How did that happen? Um,
Absolutely.
or even in dreams. I know
Yep.
when I was younger, my best friend from growing up, her mother passed away when we were 11 or 12 years old, and I didn't dream about her for a very long time, but when I was getting ready to go to college, I had a very vivid dream that I can still
Mhm.
remember to this day, even though college was about 20 years ago, a little bit more than that. And it was one of those that I woke up and I was like, I wonder if that was really her.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually have several women from my life, three women. I call them my mothers, my three mothers,
Mm,
um, that have passed at different times. And as each one has passed, they've come and they have offered me comfort and protection at different moments in my life. So
mm,
they're my godmother, my husband's grandmother, and my grandmother.
mm.
And like, it's been a year, but like last a year ago, I had to have my appendix removed, and it's a
Wow.
little, it's unusual to be
An
having that so
adult.
late. Yeah. But and they do it differently now. They actually put you on antibiotics before they do a surgery, so they can kind of slow it down so it's not an emergency.
Oh, interesting.
Before it was like they would like just go
Rush
straight to
you in,
surgery.
right?
But now they kind of like stretch it out so they can like let you rest and like have optimal situation, which is cool. I mean, like, unless it's like actually an emergency.
Right.
So I was one of those people where it was not an emergency situation. They gave me the antibiotics. So I was in the hospital overnight, and it's like not great to be hanging out in the hospital. You
No,
don't want to be in a hospital overnight.
no.
Um, but these mothers were with me, like just like being like soothing presence, and just like offering their strength and stuff. And um and some of them, my godmother has been gone for a long time, for decades,
Mm,
and then my husband's grandmother, it's been 8 years, and then my grandmother is just like two.
mm,
And so it's like, even though we've had different amounts of time together, they they were still these wonderful spirits in life, and
mm,
then now also in death.
mm,
And it's just been a really lovely thing to be able to have them even
mm-hmm.
now. And I think a lot of people, they question, like, oh, like maybe this person is here, like I feel like maybe they're here. If you feel like that person is there, they are. They
Right,
totally are.
right,
And just trust that, like, yes, that person is like watching over you, and yes, that person is like is doing good stuff for you on the other side, and will be so happy to see you at the end.
right. Right. That's actually after I had the miscarriage. My listeners know I was 16 weeks when I found out that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. And first of all, it was life changing. I'd never
Of course.
experienced any pregnancy loss I had had three beautiful, perfect children, and then I was a surrogate for a baby in 2019 in December. I gave birth. Thank God he is happy and healthy. But I never asked for a sign. I never thought that I would get a sign. And yet afterwards, for weeks, I lost the baby August 25th. For weeks and weeks and weeks, like up until the end of December, I saw butterflies everywhere,
Mm,
everywhere. Like
yeah,
we'd be driving and my kids were like, "Why are there so many butterflies out?" And I'm like, "It's the baby saying hi." That was the only explanation I could come up with. And then
yeah.
now I don't see them as often, but even yesterday I was getting out of my car and right now it's, the beginning of March and
Mhm.
butterflies aren't really, I live in Florida, butterflies aren't around this time of year. It's still a little early. And a butterfly just fluttered in front of my face and sort of sat there in the air for a few seconds and then kept going. And I was like,
Yep.
that that was such a beautiful message. And it was so simple and it was so easy to be like, hi. That was all
Yeah.
I needed.
Yeah. It's actually butterflies are one of those things. So I will say, like, butterflies and birds are really common ways that um our loved ones will use to say hello to us,
Mm.
because they are beings that operate in liminal space. Like
Oh,
they're in the
interesting.
air, and whenever there's a liminal space, like an in-between space,
Mm.
it's easier for spirit to manipulate.
Okay.
Um, so that's why butterflies and like birds in particular will often be messengers for
Mm.
spirit. And you'll even see like in myth and those things, there'll be references to them. So it's like I also when my grandmother was like in the process of dying, it was just I just saw massive amounts of monarchs. It was like
Mm.
the migration showed up, and wherever like I would be driving, it would just be like these clouds of monarchs, and I'm like,
Mm.
oh my god. I was like, this is definitely like my grandmother, like she's leaving, and like this is the process, and showing me that that's a thing.
Mm.
So yeah, those are two like things that I would like. I definitely like, if you're looking, if you want a sign, I
They're very
mean,
easy to
definitely
find.
birds and butterflies are a way that, and like you'll feel it physically,
Right.
like in your body, you'll know this is a sign for me.
Right.
That's how you'll know, because you'll get chills, or you just have like a sudden like feeling in your gut.
Hmm.
So, and just like trust, like anybody who's listening, that just trust yourself.
Hmm.
Like if you have one of those feelings that yes, it is my loved one. Yes, they are
Right.
saying hello. Like,
Right. Right. Because
yes,
sometimes a butterfly could fly by and you're like, I barely even noticed it. But when it stops
yeah.
right in front of your face, it's hard not to notice. And then it's hard to ignore. And then you sit there and you're like, was that or wasn't
Hmm.
that? And you're right. If you just trust your instinct and even if, look, God forbid it's not the person that you thought it was, and it's just a butterfly, what harm does it do to think,
It doesn't. Yeah,
hi,
exactly.
right? Like there's no
Yeah.
harm in just being like, maybe that was the person that I lost.
And but I would say like, I mean, like that situation you're talking about where the butterfly hovers, that's like, hi. It's like
Right.
waving in front of your
Right.
face, like, hello, I'm here.
Right.
It's the same thing with like bees. It's another one of those, again, because they're flying, they're in air, it's
Mm.
liminal. Sometimes they'll like stop, and like if they're like right up in your grill, like that is for sure that is for
Interesting.
sure a sign.
Right. So don't freak out if a bee is trying to say
Don't freak
hi.
out. Yeah. I mean, well, I love bees. They're really wonderful creatures, but I know that some people are scared. If you're scared of them, I
If
get it.
you're if you're
Probably not going to
allergic to
be a
bees,
sign
I
for you.
totally get it, but I agree.
But
I
like,
think when I was little, I actually have such a beautiful story about that with my mom where I must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, and I wanted to know everything. I had questions about how language formed. I had questions about how electricity started. I had everything. I wanted to know all of the things. And I said to my
mhm.
mom while she was getting ready one day, how do bees make honey? And she said, it's a secret. I can't tell you. And I said, no, no, you can trust me. I can keep a secret. And my mom to this day will remind me of that. And I'm like, but it's true. First of all, I do want to know, but also they're just this beautiful creature that have these incredible secrets that you're like, how do bees make honey? It's such a beautiful way that this insect flies around and gathers pollen and then creates this perfect elixir.
Yes. Yeah. Bees are fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a very long rant about bees.
It's totally, no, I get it. I get it. No, I mean, and that's, and like, I should say, because I think that it's important also because like, it's not just nature that can be that spirit can come to you and like give you messages. Like
Mhm.
I want like your listeners to know like there's lots of different ways. Like it could, when that Adele song was really popular, Hello,
Yeah.
how could you not, right?
Yes.
Girl I was talking about, I was on the way to her memorial service, the one who had passed. And she was very active because she really wanted me to go to the service. And I was like, okay, I'll go. But I got in the car and I was driving, and then like I turned on the car and it was like, hello. Like,
She's like, hi, yes, I get it.
I
I'm
know that
going.
you're here. Like, yes. I was just like, oh my gosh. Which is like, all right, yeah. So like songs, I mean, electronics again, because it does involve liminal spaces. You're talking
Right,
about things going through the air, with
right.
frequencies and stuff. It's easy to manipulate. It's easy for spirit to use it.
It's
Um,
also in the placement of things. I just recently had someone very close to me pass away, and um, whipped cream was a thing. Like he would always spray whipped cream in a kid's mouth whenever anybody who would walk in the door, he'd be like, "Come here, come to the refrigerator." And you're like, "What are you talking about?" And I remember the first time he did it for my daughter, she looked at me, she must have been 4 or 5 years old, and she's like, "Is this okay?" And I'm like, "Yes, go. He's gonna give you something special." And he sprayed whipped cream in her mouth. And we were at a party recently and there was whipped cream on the table. And I was like, who puts whipped cream on the table? Are you kidding me? And I felt like
mhm.
that was his way of just being like, I'm here. What's up?
Yeah. Yeah. It's subtle, and it's like if you're just open and like willing to receive those kinds of little moments,
Hmm.
little signs, like they really can be everywhere and anywhere.
Hmm.
It's just, you just have to be open to them. And I feel like that can be a really helpful thing when you're going through loss, and even to know, like even years later, being connected to those people,
Hmm.
like having those little things, it can be a really powerful gift and a
Yeah.
blessing.
I think it's also thinking about it in the sense of a soul is a soul and it's not limited to the age that you lost them, right? So, especially in things like pregnancy loss, a lot of times you think of it as not a fully formed baby, but at the same time, the soul was there, the soul was present. And so, even then, you can still get messages after that soul is no longer here, even if it never spent time outside of the womb as a living being.
Totally. And actually, I mean, so I actually had a client who came to me um when they were pregnant and they were having some questions about the pregnancy, and I did a reading for them, and talked with the baby, the
Hmm.
spirit of the baby, because the I like to say that uteruses, I mean, like, people who are walking around with uteruses in their bodies are walking around with spirit portals.
Hmm.
It's a thing.
Hmm.
This is literally where a spirit is incarnated. Is
Hmm.
is it's a connect. It's like this kind of amazing transformative engine that happens in the uterus,
Right.
and so we like when the pregnancy is occurring, there is this conversation that can take place with the spirit
Hmm.
of the unborn baby. And you can say, like, you can talk about your fears, you can talk about what you want, you can talk about like what, like, fate and all these different things
Hmm.
with the spirit. And it can be a really powerful thing when that is able to happen.
Hmm.
And I think it's a really powerful thing too, like, to say when you need to say goodbye,
Hmm.
that's also available to you. Like, it's not, there's so much room, and I feel like that's not really, I feel it benefits us when we like open the doors to kind of have these kinds of conversations and talk about like what is possible, saying hello for the first time, saying goodbye, you know, whenever that might occur.
Mhm.
And also the possibility that like maybe they show up in your life later in a
Right.
different way, you
Right.
know,
Well,
like,
that's like my mom always says I was my grandfather. My grandfather passed away 7 years before I was born. So there's no way that I would know his personality. There's no way that I would know who he is innately. And yet, from the time I was very little, my mom used to say all the time, I had his mannerisms, I had his personality, I had his disposition. But
mm,
that's not knowing him physically here, that's almost
mhm.
impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild how these things can play out. I mean,
Mhm.
and like I would never like, even though I have this door to the other side of experience, I would never say that, or I should say, I'm always open to the possibility of things, you know,
Mhm.
because like there's more things in heaven and earth, right?
Totally.
and it's like there's a lot of mystery. There's just a
Right.
lot of mystery, and there's a lot of beauty in that. And
Mhm.
I think just like being open to the possibility of things, and how this can work and how it might work is a really helpful thing.
Mhm. Was there a way that I know you said you had some specific instances that spirit said, "Okay, in your mid-30s, now it's time to really tap into what you
Mhm.
have." But was there
Yeah.
a way, especially now, obviously in your mid-30s, the internet was around, that you could then A, connect with other people and B, really hone in and understand how to use what you have to the best ability?
So I'll give you a little bit of background about what happened, and that'll kind of, so I wrote a world religion curriculum, and I was in the process of, I published that, and then I decided I wanted to write an interfaith devotional
Mhm.
to go along with it. And so I was reading a lot of holy texts from the six big major most popular world religions, and it got me into this state of constant prayer,
Mhm.
and in that, and through like with along with intentional meditation, I had this, it was like a it was like a baptism. Actually, it was a vision, and it took place in spirit, but it was a kind of baptism, and initiation,
Mhm.
really. And at that point, you know, I started reading about different things, but unfortunately, even then, I mean, this is like, you know, this is like 6, 7 years ago.
Mhm.
um this was the woo spaces, the spiritual spaces online were still very much of the Wild West.
Mhm.
Even to this day, they're kind of like that.
Right.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of BS. There's a lot of junk out
Right.
there. Um, and a lot of misinformation. And some people just make stuff up.
Right.
Um, or they like take stuff from Hollywood movies and think that it's real because it was in a Hollywood movie.
Mhm.
And even though those things are, you know, amalgamations of different stuff. And so I had to like sift through a lot of crap,
Mhm.
um, in order to figure out what was real, what was helpful, and what I could actually take and use. Um, that sucked. Frankly, it was a lot of like, wow, you know, like because there's so many charlatans,
Right.
and some of them don't even realize that they're charlatans, or they, you know, they're like the L. Ron Hubbards, or they want to be L. Ron Hubbards. And um and I and I just uh I just found that very frustrating. So it
Mhm.
took me a while to kind of figure things out. And I realized actually a lot of the information that was contained in holy texts was relevant. um
Interesting.
it's suddenly like, I started reading some of these things and I realized, oh, this has a different meaning now.
Mhm.
I mean, it was like a new level of understanding prophets that I wasn't able to understand beforehand. And there were
Mhm.
some online teachers too, that like of different people that they would say things and things suddenly made sense in new ways that I couldn't have understood prior.
Mhm.
Before it was like really vague bullshit kind of things, and I'd be like, what are you saying? And then suddenly
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, I got
Right.
it now.
That
So
epiphany.
so it took me a while, and then I kind of, and then there was trial and error. Like
Mhm.
when your abilities kind of open up, it's like, um you have every sense turned up to 11,
Oh, wow.
and
Was it like a fire hose of information?
it can be, yeah,
Mm.
especially, I mean, fortunately I live in a new build home. Nobody else had lived in this house before us. The neighborhood is fairly clean energetically. So I didn't have to deal with that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I live in California, so you don't have these lingering things. If I lived near Gettysburg, that would be horrible.
I actually grew up in a place that was the town next to Washington's Crossing, and it was
Okay.
called Washington's Crossing because it was literally where Washington crossed the Delaware, and my town was known as a ghost town. Like when I was little, I for sure saw a ghost when I with my parents.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just, it, and that can, when you live in places that have a lot of that history or like high emotional events that have happened, it can be really like extra difficult.
Mhm.
Like my college years happened, like I went to school on the East Coast, and those were difficult because
Mhm.
of that, because there were old buildings.
Mhm.
Um, but living where I live, when they turned on, it was like, okay, I just have to deal with like living people, which is
Which in
also
California
not.
can be a lot.
Yeah, it could be it was a lot. I mean, it's still a lot. People, because you're dealing with the things that you physically see, and then you're
Mhm.
dealing with people's energy, you're dealing with the energy of objects, you're dealing with the energy of the land, you're dealing with the energy that's in plants, you're dealing with the energy that's in the houses and the construction. I mean, like, there's all these different things. You're dealing with any kind of spiritual beings that might be there. You're dealing with
Mhm.
deceased people and animals with that. So it's like multiple layers of information.
Mhm.
And if you're a powerful psychic, you can feel it in multiple ways. You can feel
Mhm.
it somatically in your body. You may be hearing things, you may be seeing things, you may be getting, thoughts, like, kind of. So there's a lot of stuff coming at you, and you have to figure out, okay, how I'm gonna live like this.
Right. In a way, I picture it as the Mel Gibson movie "What Women Want," where all of a sudden he can hear what women
Yeah.
say, and all around he's like, "Oh my God, why? I turn it off. I don't want to hear what they say. Turn it off. Turn it off."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is kind of like that. That's like the funny, like, kind of cute version.
Right.
But it could be like sort of a horror. I mean, like, it's like, like, it's like kind of like a psychological, like, oh God, like, what is happening to me? And
Hmm.
especially if you don't have any resources or knowledge to kind of navigate this in a safe way, it can
Hmm.
be really difficult. I mean, and even like there are some places, if it has a lot, like an antique shop or a pawn shop or someplace like that,
Oh,
if you're
interesting.
psychic and you go into one of those places, it can make you physically ill. Like, you could
Right.
actually get nauseous, like
Because of
be
all of the
fatigued.
energy that's with the
It's
things that are in
just
the
too
store.
much. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I had to learn boundary setting in a
Hmm.
really trial by fire way.
Hmm.
But the nice thing is that spirit responds to rules. If you set the rules, you set the rules of engagement, you can control things very easily.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't have to be this scary, exhausting thing if you do set your boundaries. If you
Right.
do that kind of, if you lay the foundation, then it can be fine. So now I can access spiritual information whenever I want, however I want.
Interesting.
So I can turn it on, I can turn it off, and it's no big deal.
Hmm.
But when you're reawakened or you've just awakened for the first time, it can be a lot.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, boundary setting.
I mean, ironically, in relationships that the person is still here physically, boundaries are extremely important also. So it just goes to
Well,
show that once you set your
yeah,
boundaries, it makes life
yeah.
that much easier.
And I would say that, with my clients, when I teach them how to set spiritual boundaries, it helps them with physical boundaries,
Hmm.
with their boundaries in the relationships. They start to be able to be like, oh, I can say no. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
you
A
can. Yeah,
friend of
you can.
mine just taught me how to protect my own energy, and I can do it around my kids, I can do it around myself, I can do it around my husband. And I feel like there's this certain power that comes with that you can say, as much as I mean, my listeners know I always say you can only control your own thoughts, your own speech, and your own action.
Mhm.
But if you don't consciously set those boundaries and say, this bubble is protecting me, there are so many things that are coming at you in all different directions
Yes.
that will affect how you think and what your reaction is. And you're not actually acting, you're always reacting, which is never a good place to be.
Yeah. No, it's definitely boundary setting, whether it's like, I mean, whether you're talking about shielding, whether you're talking about filtering or grounding or cutting or any of those kinds of things,
Hmm.
they're all about taking back your power.
Right.
They're all about empowering you. And um, fundamentally, I would say, owning and pursuing psychic development is a process of empowering.
Hmm.
It's the process of owning yourself and of taking back your power and asserting your power in reality,
Hmm.
at different levels.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I love it.
I can
I love it.
tell you speak so passionately about it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I love it for other people. Like
Hmm.
I want other people to experience that their own power.
Hmm.
I want them to have that feeling that like they are really being themselves the way that they were meant to be.
Hmm. Do you ever feel that because, and maybe you get messages from people that, so this doesn't really apply, but um, that because of the people that you've known, do you get more messages from them, or is it like an equal balance of people that just say, I have a message and I need to get somebody, you don't know them, and you're sort of in their space, and then you're like, wait a minute, I don't know why, but I need to talk to you.
So generally speaking, so this is one of my boundaries is I don't talk to dead people with
Okay.
with two exceptions. One for work, I should say, for work.
Okay.
Um I talk to people who have passed in my life because that's my like they're my connections, and so
Right. And
I
that's
do
a
that.
comfort for you, so it makes
Yeah,
sense.
and also like it's kind of that's really fun, but that's a different um but like so the two exceptions are I will talk to people in sudden death situations where it was an unexpected death,
Mhm.
and the spirit comes to me, and sometimes there are people that I've known, like that story that I shared with you earlier,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's like I happen to be reading about the experience online and I just get this feeling like they come to me and I like feel like I have to share something with
Mhm.
that person. And that's just because I just feel like those emotional situations, it's it's a kind of like ministering. It's a kind of community healing
Mhm.
that I'm offering. So
Right. I
that's
mean,
kind
it's
of
closure in a way.
yeah. And so that's why I do it in those kind of unexpected loss situations.
Mhm.
In the other exception is I do have a kind of mediumship reading, which is the message you most need to hear from spirit.
Okay.
And that is it's a total gamble
Mhm.
what like what's going to come through. Like
Mhm.
I can't guarantee anything. It's a vision. It's a kind of vision. So it's very symbolic. So it could be like, I mean, it could be anything,
Mhm.
but I have had many clients have loved ones that appear,
Mhm.
to share different messages, and it's been really beautiful to be able to see that, especially like with past parents or in-laws or different people that were close,
Mhm.
be able to like have this beautiful to share this beautiful vision for this client and have them get this level of closure that they wouldn't otherwise receive.
Right.
It's a real joy.
I'm sure. So then if you have those two specific boundaries, when you are connecting, are you connecting with people's energy that are here and that's how you work as a conduit?
uh so the way that I need to give you a little bit of psychic information background
Okay.
so that everybody's on the same page. um there's different psychic senses, and they work differently. Most people who are psychic have a dominant sense, like the one that they rely on the most.
Mhm.
Mine happens to be clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. So
Okay.
when I interact with spirit, I always see something. I do have the other ones, I will hear things, and I will, I will know things, and I will feel things somatically. Um, but primarily when I engage with spirit, I see things.
Mhm.
And so my readings are always visions. They kind of work like movies.
Mhm.
But they're like interactive. So how I enter into the vision depends on the client. Um, but usually what I'll do is I will connect with them, kind of like they'll tell me like, hey, I want to do a message from spirit, since we've been talking about that and that's relevant. That's kind of what I'll talk about here. And I'll be like, okay. And then I'll ask them like if they have a particular focus that they want me to kind of look for some kind of message around that, or if they just want general and just surprise.
Right.
Most people want a surprise,
Mhm.
which is kind of interesting.
Well, I think because most people have lost so many people anyway, there's not one person, at least in my experience, there's not one person that I would say, I have to hear from my grandfather. I have to hear
Yeah.
from my best friend's mother. I have to hear from whoever it is. It's sort
Mhm.
of like I guess whoever's going to show up can show up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I would say like it's kind of I would actually say that more often than a past loved one, it's a spirit guide that shows up.
Oh, interesting.
Um, because that tends to be what people need. Now, like the reason why I don't do like specifically um deceased loved one readings is because I have found that when people seek out that specific kind of reading, there's the danger of getting too stuck in the past
Hmm.
and kind of uh it become habit forming.
Hmm. Right. You
And
were like almost like the telephone where they then come to see you again and they're like, I want to talk to that person again. I need to talk to that
yeah,
person.
and I don't want that for them. And
Hmm.
so I made an intentional decision to not provide that because I want people to be here now.
Hmm.
Life is short. And so even so I do allow for the possibility of that closure with the
Right.
reading, but I also want to make sure that people are present in their life
Right.
and that they live fully for the remainder of their life that they have, because it's short. Like
Right.
you only have so much time. So
Right.
you might as well be here fully present.
Right.
And if someone has a message for you, they'll show up,
Right.
and we just trust that what you really need in that moment when you're asking for it will present itself.
Mhm.
And it does.
Yeah.
It always does,
Yeah.
even if it's surprising, and even if it doesn't make sense immediately, it makes sense over time.
Right.
So I started to say, I want to go back to make sure I actually answered your question, which is, um, a lot of times when I enter into the vision, it's like there's like a mist usually, and one thing will present itself. Like
Mhm.
maybe I'll first hear a sound, or maybe I'll first like see one thing like it's coming out of the mist, and then slowly the veil like lifts, and then the whole scene reveals itself, and I can
Mhm.
kind of like step into it and see, different things will present themselves to me, and symbols will like pop out. And then like we talk about what those symbols mean, and then I usually have a conversation with whatever spirit shows up, and ask specific questions and get, different answers
Mhm.
that point to what they need to know.
Mhm. I know it sounds silly, but it sounds like such a J.K. Rowling vision of the seventh book of Harry Potter in terms of him experiencing death, but in a way where he's not fully gone in a train station where as he's thinking of something, it's there. And it felt like it was always meant to be there, even though it wasn't there a second ago.
The time and space have no meaning when it comes to spirits, so um anything can be instant. Like if I think of, I mean, like I can think about my grandmother shows up, like
Hmm.
I can think about one of my spirit guides, they're here right now,
Hmm.
with me. If I think about like a specific object or specific like I can tune into the entire world, everything that has been, everything that will be is available to me at
Right.
any moment.
Right.
And
Well, everything is an energy, and energy doesn't cease to exist.
exactly. And so that's why boundaries are so important. Because if I just have myself on, I could be talking to Prince right now if I really wanted to, or I could be talking to, my dead cat,
Right.
or I could be talking to, whatever. There's no
Whoever's
there's
going to show up is going to show up, and you're going to be like,
yeah, I mean,
enough.
I could be across the universe if I really
Right.
wanted to, because there is time and space have no meaning,
Right.
which is also why, like, when we do these kinds of readings, I always tell my clients, I'm like, it's going to have one meaning now, it's going to have a different meaning in a month,
Oh, interesting.
and in 6 months, and maybe even a year.
Hmm.
Like, don't forget about this. Like,
Right.
come back to this later and like revisit it,
Mhm.
because all of it, like I always describe spiritual information as digital, not analog, right? It's not a line, like
Right. It's not a
like
linear thing.
it's like a huge, like big chunk of information that's being sent to you. So you need to kind of unpack it for each moment,
Mhm.
because time and space don't matter.
Right. Right.
So which is kind of like hard, because we're human, and we're like, okay, like I'm born, I like to like to like in a line, but
Right.
no, that's not how spirit works. So
It's so funny because I just brought this up the other day that both of my grandparents passed away before my own children were born. My grandmother passed away in 2001, and my grandfather passed away when I was pregnant with my daughter in 2010. And to me, it's a very odd feeling that they've never met them because I talk about them so much and
mhm,
it's like they're still here. Like I feel like I could pick up the phone and call my grandfather and be like, "Here, talk to your great grandchildren."
mhm,
And my kids also, my daughter would be like, I mean, uh, didn't we see them? Like, I don't, I'm sure I've seen your grandmother, and maybe she
mhm.
thinks that because she's seen pictures, or maybe she thinks that because she has really seen my grandmother
Yeah,
in a spirit form. But it's just so fascinating to me, and I talk about that a lot because it really does. The more that you continue to live with them in your heart, the more that they'll be here.
totally. I mean, there's the lot, like this idea that there are lines that keep us from these people, is it's a really bizarre thing. And I wouldn't being psychic, having these experiences, it's different. So that like I see those things. And so it's like, people talk about loss and they talk about these like how, oh, they're not here, like, and they're like, I'm just like, yeah, but they're right here.
Right.
You can be with them at any time. It's different. It
Right.
is
You're not going to
different.
get the same response as if you're talking to
No,
them face to face.
no.
You'll get a
But
sign or a message instead of
yeah,
an answer.
yeah, but they are there with you, like
Right.
like just like trust.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if like I wish that more people could have this knowledge,
Hmm.
this and access this part of themselves. I mean, like I would say that everybody has the wiring to be psychic. It's I like to compare it to basketball. Everybody's not going to be Kobe Bryant.
I'll go with Michael Jordan, but
It's
to
fine. Like
whoever
whoever
you
you want to pick,
choose.
you want to pick somebody, Steve Kerr, I don't care who
Right.
you want to pick. That's fine. Like everybody's not going to be like superstar
Right.
basketball player. However,
Everybody can learn how to dribble a ball.
most people can learn how to play a pickup game if they want to, and
Right.
they can access that. And that's enough. That brings them enough joy. And some people never will want to. And some people like they can't because of, how they were born or some kind of trauma that they experience. And
Hmm.
that's also okay. That's like the
Hmm.
full realm range of human experience.
Right.
However, like more people could learn how to play the pickup game.
Right.
And so it's, actually, I hope like that's part of what that's part of what I do is I help people get from where like that repressed spot to where they can actually control it and start to have these experiences and intentionally connect and intentionally like control and intentionally um have these beautiful conversations with people on their own.
Right.
They need to come to me if they you know um although they might whatever, but but
And sometimes, look, people might want to come to you anyway to confirm what they've gotten that you can
well
say,
and
Did you
yeah,
see anything?"
well, that's like, I mean, I have like I have clients that basically my one-on-one clients, they're coming to me for psychic development stuff.
Mm.
And also they'll be like part of what we do is they'll say like, okay, I had this experience, can you help me figure it out? And I'm like,
Hmm.
yes, like let's, this is so juicy and fun,
Right.
and like and part of it is like saying like having these connections with former, with deceased loved ones. And
Hmm.
like, and it's just like, it's such a joy to be able to share that and and like help guide these wonderful humans into this space where they can safely and confidently connect and have these like beautiful closure moments on their own
Hmm.
without me as an intermediary.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, I just love it.
That's
I
awesome.
love it.
If you could share one final parting thought or piece of information or something that you feel like we didn't touch on, what would that be?
I think I just want to, well, there's two things.
Okay.
One is, and they'll be quick. One is that I've found to transform grief is to put on a song and dance through it. And that's also a beautiful way to connect with the person that you've lost.
Hmm.
um, that's a really powerful practice. And I really recommend it to anyone who's listening. If you're actively grieving, to get a song that really speaks to that, where you are in your grief process, and move with it.
Hmm.
And you will feel that loved one with you as you're
Hmm.
doing that. And the second thing is just a reminder that even though they're like, well, no, let me reverse it.
Okay.
Life is short. Say the things that you need to say now.
Hmm.
Have the conversations now.
Hmm.
Do the things that you want to do with your loved ones now,
Hmm.
because tomorrow isn't promised.
Right.
And life is special. This is like being in this body is something that is unique to
Hmm.
experience. And so, tell people that you love them, compliment the cashier, give hugs freely, laugh, do the fun things, enjoy the things, and feel your feelings wherever you are in that, and
Hmm.
and live, really
Hmm.
live. And trust that it's not going to be so long without those wonderful people that you loved. You'll see them again.
That's really beautiful. If people want to be able to find you, how can they reach out?
You can find me on my website, which is alexisdonkin.com, or you can also find me. I'm on TikTok at alexis.donkin or Instagram again at alexis.donkin. And I love DMs.
Perfect. I will put all of that in the show notes so that whoever wants to reach out, they can. And Alexis, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a pleasure getting to know you and learning more about what you do and how you can connect.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today on Pushing Through Loss. I hope this episode has provided support, understanding, and a sense of community. Remember, you are not alone on your journey, and you have the strength to face the challenges that come your way. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave me a review and consider sharing it with others who may benefit. Together, we can help each other heal and activate our inner strength warriors. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations, and until next time, you got this.